When I think about my life now, it's hard for me to believe that it belongs to the same woman I was just a couple of years ago. In those days, I lived on the edge, between fear and hope, between silence and thunder, between pretending and just surviving. Today, everything is different. Today, I don't wake up to the sound of a slamming door or a broken glass, but to the soft light filtering through my bedroom curtains. I wake up safe. And this is not an exaggeration, not a beautiful metaphor. It is literally a feeling of peace, so real and rare that I still sometimes fear that it is temporary, like the morning mist over the river. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My apartment on the third floor of an old brick house in downtown Portland is my fortress. Each item here is selected by me. I remember arranging books by color, hanging paintings, and choosing warm lighting so that everything in this space would tell me you're home. I chose this armchair by the window, these cushions in the living room, these cups in the kitchen. I became the mistress of my life again. It was not easy to reassemble yourself from the fragments, to cut off other people's expectations from the skin, to wash the memory of fear. But I did it. I persevered. Working for a technology company, where I manage projects, has become for me not only a source of stability, but also proof, I'm coping. The team respects me, my colleagues listen, and my superiors appreciate me. Every completed project is a brick in the foundation of my new life. And although sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night from dreams in which Trevor returns, I am no longer his hostage. I am free. I left a year ago. Literally. At 2 o'clock in the morning, in February, in the rain, with a backpack and a phone in my pocket. I remember how my hands were shaking, how there was a lump in my chest, and how my heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. But I left. I could no longer wait for him to stop. I couldn't keep justifying his breakdowns, his screams, his hands slamming into the walls next to my face. I knew that if I stayed even one more day, I would disappear. Not literally, but I'll disappear from the inside. That's when I called Zach. He didn't ask any questions, he just came. My parents accepted me in silence. Mom hugged me, as in childhood, and did not let go for a long time. My father looked away, but I could see his lip trembling. We didn't talk about it out loud, not then. But I knew they were on my side. They didn't know how serious it was. No one knew. I hid too well behind smiles, behind photos on family holidays, behind the phrases, "Everything is fine with us." It was only later, when I told them, when I showed them the bruises, when I silently pulled the X-ray out of my bag, that they understood. They didn't ask unnecessary questions. They were just there. And that was enough. We've become closer since then. We started having family dinners, once a month, always on Sunday. Sometimes they do, sometimes I do. It has become something permanent, an anchor in the stream of days. At the last dinner, Mom, pouring me tea, suddenly said, "Maybe we should all go somewhere. Relax, unwind." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. All together? Of course, her father supported her. We haven't been anywhere for a long time. The last time was when you were still at school. Oh, my God, I laughed, that tent nightmare. Zach, who was sitting with a glass of beer, chuckled. It wasn't a nightmare, it was an adventure. We almost drowned. We all laughed. It was warm, simple, almost childlike. And in that laugh, I suddenly felt how much I needed it. In their warmth, in the sense of normalcy, in the family that was now really my back. They asked me to arrange a trip. They didn't have the opportunity to spend money on tickets and hotels. After losing his contract, my father worked part-time at a construction site, and my mother worked as a librarian's assistant at a school. Zach had just graduated from college and was looking for a job. With my stable salary and decent savings, I agreed without hesitation. That evening, when I got home, I opened my laptop. I was reviewing photos of coastal towns until I settled on Savannah, Georgia. Ancient streets, pavements, Spanish moss on trees, salty air, and the ocean nearby. It seemed perfect. I've booked 4 tickets, for Mom, Dad, Zach, and myself. I picked up a cozy hotel where I could rent 2 rooms, one for my parents, the other for me and my brother. I looked through dozens of restaurants and made a list of places worth visiting: the Botanical Garden, the Museum of Ship Art, vintage shops. I loved it. I felt useful, needed. It was familiar, comfortable. Taking care of them made me feel like my own soul was calming down. When I closed the laptop, dusk was already gathering outside the window. I lit candles, poured myself a glass of white wine, and settled into a chair by the window. Jazz was playing softly, and I watched the lights of the street reflected in the wet asphalt. The world has become manageable again. I knew I was waiting. I knew what would happen. And for the first time in a long time, everything seemed to be in place. I remember that day down to the smallest detail, as if through a frosted glass. It was overcast, and the sky seemed to freeze halfway to rain, but it was still holding out. I was returning home from work when a message from my mom popped up on my phone screen. "Honey, can you come over for dinner tonight? There's something we need to discuss. It's very important." It was a simple message, no exclamation marks, but there was something unsettling about it. My mother never wrote so briefly, without a sunshine or a smiley face. I reread the message a few times, figured out what the problem might be, and eventually replied, "Of course. I'll be there around 7. Driving to the suburbs has always given me a strange feeling. On the one hand, there is the familiar comfort of childhood: white fences, lilacs along the sidewalks, familiar mailboxes. On the other hand, there is a slight tension, as if I am returning to the scenery of a life that I have already grown out of. I turned onto the street where my parents' house stood, a 2-story building with peeling paint on the shutters and a gently rocking chair on the veranda. The lights were on in the windows, and for a second I wanted to turn back. Intuition whispered that something was wrong. Mom greeted me at the door with her usual smile, but her eyes were slightly anxious, as if she was trying to hide an inner storm. My father was already sitting at the table in the dining room, reading the newspaper, and Zach was pouring wine, humming something to himself. The atmosphere was too perfect. The stove smelled of fried garlic and rosemary. Mom had made my favorite pasta with shrimp. It was immediately alarming. Our family didn't just do that. Such dinners were usually preceded by news that made you want to cry or leave by slamming the door. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying not to betray my inner anxiety. "Of course," Mom replied too quickly. "I just have some news. Sit down, dinner is almost ready." We started eating. I tried to take my time, but the food stuck in my throat. My father put down his fork, cleared his throat, and looked at my mother. Zach, on the other hand, seemed particularly animated. "So," Mom began, carefully shifting the napkin from her lap, "we have a surprise for you. Zach, he's engaged." "What?" I didn't immediately understand if I had heard correctly. "Yes," Zach confirmed, beaming. "Everything happened recently. We didn't want to talk earlier, so we decided to wait until everything was official." "And who is she?" I asked, feeling something cold rise up my spine. "Jessica. Maybe you know her. She used to live in the center. We met through friends." The names sounded ordinary, foreshadowing nothing. But in the next second, my body reacted before my mind. Jessica. A new name. A new shell. The same woman Trevor started dating shortly after our divorce. I've seen them together on social media. She was called Tracy then. The hair is slightly shorter, but the same eyes, the same predatory oval face, the same arrogance in the smile. I slowly put the glass down on the table. Is Jessica Tracy the one Trevor was with? There was a pause. Mom looked away, and Dad fiddled with the edge of the tablecloth. Zach shrugged his shoulders. Well, yes, she had a different name, but it doesn't matter. We've been together for a few months now. She's amazing. And we want her to come with us to Savannah. I wanted you to be the first to know. What did you say? My voice sounded flat, almost alien. Jessica's coming with us. Instead of you. Instead of me? I looked at the faces, looking for a hint of a joke. But no one was laughing. We thought you'd understand, Mom said, finally looking into my eyes. You said yourself that you need to be alone sometimes. And Jessica, she's part of our family now. And Trevor? I asked. The words were as dry as dust. He's going too, Zach said. We're talking again. He's changed. Honestly. He's a different person. Jessica told me a lot about him. I sat with my fingers gripping the edge of the table. My heart was pounding so loudly that I almost couldn't hear what was being said next. Faces moved, mouths opened, and voices vibrated in the air. But I was in another reality. The one where I was betrayed again. Where my family, my support, my protection, chose a man who threw dishes at me, who strangled me in a quarrel, who drove me to the point where I ran out of my own house in the rain, barefoot. I stood up. Slowly, trying not to drop the chair. All three of them looked at me, first with surprise, then with awkwardness. Are you serious? That's all I could say. You choose him. You really think that everything happened? An exaggeration? Mom muttered something. My father looked away. Zach shrugged his shoulders. Maybe you haven't told me everything, Sarah. He said you were provoking him too. That everything was not so clear. Those words hit me the hardest. Not with a fist. Worse. They were like a knife slowly entering under the ribs. I didn't say anything else. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. She just left. She dressed in silence, closed the door behind her, got into the car, and drove home in a daze. I didn't go to bed that night. I sat down at my laptop and methodically, point by point, canceled everything. Plane tickets, hotel reservations, excursions. Everything was registered in my name. I saved the cancellation confirmations and attached them to the email. In the subject of the letter she wrote, "Your vacation has been canceled. Not at my expense anymore." And she clicked send. The amount of losses was decent. But the feeling of freedom is priceless. I paid for the right not to be the person that can be replaced. I paid to never wake up in a house where they think I'm crazy again. It wasn't a loss. It was a victory. When I closed my laptop after sending the last email confirming the cancellation of my vacation, there was silence. She was not the one who was oppressive, but dense, warm, enveloping, like a blanket on her shoulders after an icy shower. I sat in the semi-darkness, hugging my knees, and for the first time in a long time I felt that I didn't have to explain, justify, or prove to anyone. I just am. And that's enough. The next morning, I woke up with a sudden decision to leave. Not to a neighboring town, not for a weekend with a friend, but somewhere far away where I could disappear, where no one would know me by name. I opened the card without thinking, just following my intuition. His finger slid across the screen and stopped at Sedona, Arizona. Red rocks, open horizons, sun, air without admixtures of other people's expectations. This place seemed to be calling me. I booked a room in a small, secluded hotel on the outskirts of the city, with wooden beams, a terrace overlooking the desert, and the promise of complete silence. 2 days later, I was standing at the reception desk, holding a small suitcase in my hands, which contained everything I needed: books, comfortable clothes, a notebook, a camera. The girl behind the counter smiled the way only people who aren't tired of other people's pain can. "Welcome to Sedona. I'm sure you'll love this place." I nodded, not wanting to explain that this was exactly what I had come for. My room was taller than all the others, with full-length windows overlooking the endless rocky massifs. The ground here was not brown, but blood red, as if nature itself had decided not to hide its wounds. I took off my shoes, went to the window and stood for a long time, looking at the horizon. No cars, no shouting, no phone calls. Only the wind curling around the stones, and the silence penetrating under the skin. I got up before dawn every morning. Yoga classes were held on the hotel terrace, and it became a ritual for me. I laid out the rug, felt the roughness of the surface under my palms, and inhaled the dry scent of sage and juniper. I learned to keep my balance in the tree pose, to be stable in the warrior pose, and to let go in the Shavasana pose. With every exhalation, I was leaving behind something from the past. It was as if the desert was taking away my pain without asking its sources. I went hiking in the afternoon. Sometimes with a guide, more often alone. Trails led up the slopes, between stone labyrinths, to observation decks where there was not a soul. I sat on the edge of the cliff, dangling my legs, and watched the sun play on the rocky ridges, as hawks slowly circled in the sky. There, in these heights, I felt so small and at the same time so real that a strange, quiet joy rose up inside. I ate slowly, alone. At the cafe by the road, I ordered dishes I had never tasted before: black bean soup, cornbread, cactus salsa. I drank iced tea with lemon and watched people, not knowing their stories and not wanting to know. It was liberating not to be on anyone's shoulder, not to be part of someone's drama. I belonged only to myself. Social media has been disabled. I have removed all notifications, put the phone in the do not disturb mode. I didn't know what was going on in the world, who broke up with whom, who had a baby, who wrote something in my direction. I was just living. Not according to schedule, not according to expectations. It feels like it. I read late into the night, wrote down dreams in a notebook, listened to music that I once loved, but stopped listening because it reminded me. Now she was healing. On the 13th day of my solitary pilgrimage, I turned on my phone. Not because I missed you, but because I felt ready. The screen was immediately filled with notifications. Messages, voice messages, emails. Missed calls, Mom, Zach, even Dad, who never called first. I flipped through them mechanically, like flipping through an old album, without wanting to go back to that moment, just to make sure. Yes, it was. The first messages were disturbing, almost pleading. Then irritation appeared. Then more pleading. Jessica was not who she claimed to be. Or maybe just that. Trevor lost his temper on the first night. In a bar at the resort, he started shouting at her, insulting her, then left, taking with him the bags and, as it turned out, the wallets of his parents. The credit cards were gone. The accounts are empty. No one knew where he had gone. Their vacation ended on the second day with a scandal, police, and lack of money. I wasn't gloating. Not an ounce. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the phone in my hands, and I felt only a slight emptiness, like after a long run. Those I've been saving for so many years are in trouble again. Only now, without me. Without my navigation, without my wallet, without my emotional insurance. I turned off the phone and went to the veranda. The sun was already setting, turning the sky a pastel shade. The wind gently ruffled my t-shirt. I took a deep breath, held it, and exhaled. Sand, salt, silence. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for other people's mistakes. For the first time, I knew that I had done the right thing. Not because she was strong. but because she chose herself. The phone rang while I was sitting on the living room floor, sorting through the stones collected in Sedona. I arranged them by color, from rusty red to pale gray, smooth, warm to the touch, as if they still held the breath of the desert. This activity calmed me down, brought me back to my body, to the moment. But the call was insistent, harsh, as if someone else's voice was trying to break through the silence. I picked up the phone without looking at the screen, and I knew it was Mom anyway. Sarah, her voice was trembling, choked. "Oh, thank God you picked up the phone." I didn't answer right away, listening to myself. I didn't feel anxious, I didn't feel worried. Just a steady, lingering tiredness. It was as if this conversation had already been lived and experienced, and now it was coming back without my consent. "You can. Can you listen to us? Just listen." I wouldn't know where to start. "Go ahead," I said, sitting down on the couch. She put her hands on her knees. The back is straight, the voice is neutral. "It was a nightmare," she gasped. "Trevor, we didn't know, Sarah. He got drunk the first night. He yelled at Jessica, called her names, and lost his temper at the bar. Security intervened. And then he disappeared. Gone. He just left, taking a bag with our things with him. And with wallets. With maps. He stripped them of everything. Every cent. We were left without money. In a strange city. She sobbed. There was a murmur from the other side, "Father." His voice was lower, muffled, but soundlessly clear. Tell her, ask." I listened to the fear and impotence intertwining in their voices, and nothing resonated in my chest. No pity. No pain. Not even gloating. "Jessica is hysterical," Mom continued. "Zach, he's just sitting there, staring at the wall. We don't know what to do. We need help. At least money for the way back. Or, just tell me what to do. You always knew everything, Sarah. She always pulled us out. You are welcome." I paused. She looked at her palm. A small scar on his wrist is a thin white stripe, a reminder. One day I fell down defending myself. One day I thought it was my fault. I remembered Zach saying, "You're not a saint either, you provoked him." I remembered my mother's eyes when she looked away when she heard my word, abuse. I remembered how they were happy to welcome him back into the family. I remembered how they had easily crossed me out. "I can't help you," I said calmly. "What?" She didn't seem to hear. "I can't help you, Mom. I'm not going to interfere. That's not my problem." There was a pause. It's long and heavy. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. "Sarah, we're your family." "We were," I said, and disconnected the call. I didn't cry. She wasn't shaking. I didn't even feel painfully relieved. Just a steady silence inside, like in a house from which the residents have moved out. It didn't hurt me, because the pain had gone away earlier, back in my parents' cafeteria, where they replaced me with the one who was breaking me. The following days were like a siege. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mom again first. Then Zach, short messages, incoherent, confused. Then came the calls from aunts, cousins, and old family friends. Everyone suddenly remembered my number, my kindness, and how you need to stick together in a difficult moment. One by one, they talked about duty, about kinship, about forgiveness. One by one, they are blocked. I've updated my phone settings and blacklisted dozens of contacts. I've set limits on incoming calls. I have set filters in the mail. I canceled all subscriptions to family updates on social networks. The world became quieter. They didn't give up. 2 days later, Mom showed up at my house. The doorman rang on the intercom. "Excuse me, Miss Martin, you have a visitor." A middle-aged woman introduced herself as your mother. "Should I let you in?" I looked at the monitor. She was standing in the lobby, her hands clasped in her coat, her face tired, gray, alien. I replied, "No. Don't let me in," and added to the unauthorized list. "Of course, ma'am." A click. Her face disappeared from the screen. I looked at the off display and felt a strange lightness. It's like I've finally learned to say, no, not in my head, not in a whisper, but out loud. Finally. Loudly. A day later, my father tried to break into the office. They told me at the reception. "Some man came, says that your father." We called security. "Do you want to add it to the unwanted list?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes. And thank you." They came again. Over and over again. But I already knew what to do. I gave instructions. I ordered new locks. Updated the security system. I put the camera by the door. The space that I had been building for so long was now protected, not only physically, but also emotionally. It was my world. My silence. My boundaries. One evening, I brewed myself mint tea, put on a warm sweater and sat on the balcony. The street was noisy below, but here, at a height, everything was like under a dome. I looked at the lights of the city and thought, for many years I lived in the mode of saving, understanding, justifying. How often have I forgotten myself for the sake of someone else's drama? How I got lost in trying to be a good daughter, a good sister, comfortable, soft, pliable. And now I was just living. No calls, no scenes, no ultimatums. I ate when I was hungry. I slept when I was tired. No one intruded. No one was shouting. No one demanded it. The world has not become perfect. I didn't become careless. But I've finally become myself. And that was enough. 3 months have passed. Autumn slowly spread across the city, turning the trees ochre and copper, and the air became transparent, tinkling like a crystal glass on the edge of a table. In the mornings, I woke up before the alarm clock, not from anxiety, not from sleep, but because the internal tension that used to hit my nerves has now been replaced by something else, clarity. I went to work in a coat that I bought for myself just because I wanted to. It was the color of forest moss and smelled of new fabric. I wore it with pleasure, like an armor of confidence that I built myself. My company was going through a period of rapid growth, and I was with it. A few weeks ago, I was promoted to senior director of the department. Now I had my own office with frosted glass and a plant in the corner, which I watered myself as a symbol of caring for what was alive. My colleagues congratulated me sincerely, hugged me, gave me chocolates and notes with wishes. One of them, Jason, with whom we had hardly spoken before, said quietly in the hallway, "You deserve it. It's clear that you are a man who has walked through fire. And it's not charred." I smiled and thanked him. I didn't explain that I was really going through fire, not metaphorical, but real, just not from the outside, but inside. Working days flowed steadily. Morning, coffee, meal, meetings. In the afternoon, analysis, strategies, negotiations. In the evening, go to the gym or take a walk in the park, sometimes meeting with friends. We chatted about TV series, politics, and new restaurants. I learned anew to be in these conversations, not to slip into the darkness of memories, not to feel the underlying tension. One day, returning home late at night, I realized that I hadn't thought about the past, my family, or who I owed or how much I owed. Just about what I want, and how to achieve it. It was like a sip of cold water in the desert. Dating came back into my life unexpectedly. At first, they were as light as a breeze. one coffee, one dinner, one movie show. No strings attached, no nervous waiting for messages, no fortune-telling game. I wasn't looking for a savior or a saved one. I just wanted someone to laugh with, not stiffly, not out of politeness, but for real. I allowed myself to be careful. One day I said to myself, you no longer have to throw yourself into the flames to prove that you deserve to be loved. And I believed it. Andrew, my cousin, wrote to me from time to time. He was one of the few who did not choose sides, did not condemn, did not try to reconcile. His messages came rarely, not intrusively. Just, "Hi, Sarah. I hope you're okay." Or, "Mom said you got a promotion. I'm proud of you." In one of the letters, he mentioned casually, Mom got a second job at a pharmacy in the evenings. Dad sold the boat. Zach came home, dropped out of college. I read it without much emotion. It was like talking about people I once knew, which were part of a book that was closed long ago. Jessica, as it turned out, had disappeared. She just disappeared. I left Zach without an explanation. He tried to find her, called, texted. Unrequited. Trevor was gone, too. His name came up in the police report, but unofficially, with no results. Their story collapsed like a house of cards, only now no one was holding the roof. Sometimes I received messages from aunts, with hints, with a little pressure. Sarah, maybe it's time to forgive? You've always been wise. Or, family is more than a grudge. I didn't answer. I no longer felt the need to be wise to others. I didn't feel the need to be someone who tolerates, smooths, heals. My home has become a place of strength for me. I redid the living room, I bought new curtains, rearranged the furniture, and hung an old painting that I had kept in the closet. Every evening, I returned to a place where I could exhale. Where you didn't have to wait for someone to break in and break the silence. Where I listened to music not to drown out the voice of anxiety, but because I liked the sounds. Where I fell asleep in my bed, not in the shelter. One day, while walking through a bookstore, I accidentally came across a psychology section. There was a book about boundaries. I picked it up, leafed through it, and smiled, not because I didn't know what boundaries were, but because now I knew them better than anyone. They were built not theoretically, but with blood and silence. I put the book back down. I didn't need it anymore. The park, where I now walked on weekends, reminded me of my childhood. Benches, squirrels, chestnuts in the grass. I walked slowly, feeling the ground spring under my feet. Autumn filled the city more and more, the air became dense, like a taut string. I breathed in and felt, I didn't just survive, I'm alive. And not according to someone else's rules, not to please other people's ideas. On their own. In its own rhythm, at its own pace. It wasn't a victory. It was harmony. I didn't feel like a heroine. I was just walking home. Winter came suddenly, as it often does in Portland, for no reason at all. The streets, which had been breathing autumn coolness yesterday, were covered with frost, and the morning air became clear and prickly. I noticed how slowly passers-by were moving, wrapped in scarves, how the pace of the city was changing, how subtle patterns were beginning to appear on the windows of my house, as if someone was drawing on the glass with frosty fingers. On such days, I especially loved the silence, early mornings with a book in an armchair, hot tea with lemon, wool socks, and semi-darkness, in which you feel not loneliness, but solitude. Everything became slow, and this slowing down, like breathing, like a pause between phrases, made it possible to hear oneself. I was returning home from work when I found a letter in my mailbox. It was real, paper, stamped, with my name written in a neat, familiar handwriting. I knew that slant of the letters, those slightly elongated vowels, only he wrote that way. My father. He was never verbose, and therefore this letter, his physical presence in my hands, felt like something heavy, almost alive. I stood in the hall clutching the envelope and didn't know what to do. Open it right away? Throw it away without reading it? Leave it for later, on, when it gets easier? I took the letter home, put it on the kitchen table, and walked past. I undressed, turned on the kettle, and changed into a soft homemade sweater. Then she went back to the letter. It lay like a strange voice in the silence, as if waiting for me to gather my courage. Several hours have passed. I had dinner and watched a movie, but every time my eyes kept returning to the white rectangle of paper on the table. He wouldn't let me rest. He was breathing in the dark. Finally, closer to midnight, I lit a candle, sat down at the kitchen table, and slowly, almost ceremoniously, opened the envelope. There were 3 pages inside. Thin blue pen, smooth, restrained text. Without calling her, my dear. It's just Sarah. I read, line by line, and my heart did not contract with pain, as before, but froze in some strange peace. He wrote without beautiful phrases, without excuses. He was just talking. He admitted that he was mistaken. He admitted that he, Mom, even Zach, were blinded by their version of the world, in which everything should have been simpler, brighter, more manageable. He wrote that it seemed to him that if he did not face reality, it would disappear. That he was afraid to admit that his daughter had suffered and he hadn't protected her. That he didn't believe because he didn't want to believe that the person they had coffee with on Sundays could be the one who raised his hand. He wrote that they chose ease, to trust someone who spoke confidently, who smiled, who manipulated subtly. That their choice cost them everything: connection with me, respect, trust, family. He didn't ask for forgiveness. I've never used the word sorry. And that made every word sound even harder. He was just admitting, yes, we betrayed you. Yes, we didn't choose you. And we live with it every day. He told me how Mom now works in 2 places, how the house has become quieter, how Zach sits in his room in the evenings and does not speak. How every evening he remembers me, not as the one who abandoned them, but as the one they lost because they couldn't be her support. He left his new phone number at the end of the letter. No request to call. No expectations. Just numbers. Like an anchor thrown into a river, not requiring anyone to hold on to it, but just in case someone wants to. I folded the letter, neatly, line by line, like a sacred document. I put it in my desk drawer and closed it. Not because she didn't want to answer, but because I didn't know if I was ready. I went out onto the balcony. The sky was dark blue, and snowflakes, slowly swirling, lay on the railing, on my hair, on the blanket that I wrapped myself in. I sat down in an armchair, hugged a cup of tea in my arms. It was almost silent outside. Only somewhere in the distance could be heard the hum of cars and the creak of footsteps on the snow. I sat and watched the snow fall on the city, as every street, every house was hidden under a white blanket. This snow was not the beginning, it was not the end. He was just a moment. Here and now. Soft, fragile, untouchable. I could feel the warmth of the tea slowly spreading inside, as my breathing became measured and calm. I wasn't thinking about calling. It's about the fact that now I have a choice. And this is the most important thing. I am no longer forced into the framework of must, sorry. I'm no longer the one who rushes to help by breaking my own wings. I am the one who listens to myself. Who respects silence. Who builds life not from the rubble of the past, but from the bricks of the present. Maybe one day I'll open the drawer. I'll take the letter in my hands. I'll dial the number. I'll say, "Hi, Dad." But that will be when I'm ready. Not because someone is waiting. It's because I want to. Not out of pity. Not out of guilt. It's about inner freedom. Now is not the time. I'm here now. On my balcony. With a blanket, tea, and snow that falls softly on the railing like a silent promise. My life is mine. Without pain. No escapes. Without debt. And that's finally enough.